ready.
Welcome everyone. My name is Rowan Moses, and today on the New Brew we have educational specialists Dr. Sandy and Adriano. I would like to start off with my personal educational focus. That's always been the creative arts. Being a person who's always expressed themselves creatively, I've hoped to kind of get into the education system to inspire teachers and students as well to discover what creativity means to them. I've been inspired by many teachers along the way, and some of them have been educational theorists. One very close to my heart is Sir Ken Robinson, who just passed away not too long ago. And also a lot of my tutors, one of them being Dr. Sandy, who has always championed my creative passion, and now meeting amazing people like Adriano. And it's such an honour to have you this evening. First off, I would like to invite Dr. Sandy to pay our respects and offer an acknowledgement of country.
Thanks, Rowan. I'm really excited about tonight, talking to both of you about an area that's really passionate for me, creativity. I've always loved it. So to start off, I just like to acknowledge I'm in Dakingyung country. We acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the traditional owners of Australia. We acknowledge their continuing connection to land and water and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. So we like to start off each episode. So this is Fear to Teach Creativity, this episode. And I'm just going to mention two quotes for you today. The first one, yes, most definitely makes sense. Ken Robinson: a vibrant school can nourish an entire community by becoming a source of hope and creative energy. But I actually want to share another one with you. So I was very fortunate to teach Rowan last year, and she did a thesis on creativity. It was her passion, and we had a delightful time together sharing that journey together. I'm going to quote you, Rowan.
Oh, no. I felt that coming.
Hence, yeah. So Rowan did an amazing study on creativity, and it just inspired me the whole time we were working together. And this is her final sentence of her thesis. So Moses 2:20, so I'm citing you.
Damn.
I believe if we embrace creativity in all its forms, it will deeply nourish, inspire, and elevate our whole society. Thank you. Over to you, Ro.
Thank you. Yeah, wow. It's crazy hearing a quote from myself. Even being an actress, you don't... No pressure. Only up from here, right, guys? Well, look, I would like to properly introduce Adriano. Let's tell you a little bit about him. He has spent over 26 years in the education system across both the Catholic and the independent sector for secondary schooling. His key ethos has been to find creative ways to engage a new generation of learners. This has inspired him to do many things, two of which is become a founding partner of a School for Tomorrow, which is an educational enterprise. And also he is one of the key hosts on Australia's leading educational podcast called Game Changers. Ooh. So welcome, Adriano. Bit of fanfare for you. We're so glad to have you on this evening.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate the invitation, and I'm just really energised by what the New Brew in particular are doing on the educational landscape. It's probably what energises about me is probably around the fact that it's a group of emerging educators, people that haven't necessarily cut their teeth in the industry, but are so passionate about helping young people discover their inherent possibility. And what I'm getting a really strong sense about from all of you, led by the esteemed colleague of ours, Dr. Sandy Nicol here, is that all of you are equally passionate about your own growth and understand the importance of being a continuous learner and unlearner yourself. And I think that's the example that's really drawn me to this group. And your energy, there's lots of light, there's lots of fun as well, but there's also a real commitment to the craft. And it encourages me just the same as young people encourage me. I think they're remarkable. And And if you're going to be the future of our schools and leading our schools, then I'm really optimistic about what that future is.
Here.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like it's like you say that about podcasts. There's so much going on behind the scenes. And, you know, I'd like to acknowledge everyone that's come before me in the past weeks. Everyone has worked so hard on our team. And you don't ever see that work. Adriana, you totally understand running such an amazing podcast yourself, the amount of effort and time it takes into going and, you know, creating the things and then, you know, recording it and everything. That in itself is an amazing creative process. And I mean, that actually leads me to my first question is a lot of people have preconceptions around the concept of creativity. And many people assume that creativity is just for the arts. So whether it be, you know, drama or dance or, you know, music. But I've seen by looking through your career that you've created so many creative avenues for yourself without it necessarily just being based on the arts, which I know you're focused in as well. Would you mind giving us an example of other creative ways that you've like implemented your creative pedagogy to maybe inspire some of us nervous pre-service teachers that feel like it's just strictly art-based only?
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for the question. I want to kind of answer the question in two parts.
Love that.
My first part to the question is that I always like to start a conversation around purpose and around the why of anything. So the first is for me about providing your listeners with some clarity and perspective about the value of the arts in education. You know, I believe in engaging with the arts is an essential part of the human experience and the whole part of learning. And so that's why it's so fundamental to be in our schooling systems. Almost as soon as motor skills are developed, children communicate through their artistic expression in some way, right? So the arts challenge us with different perspectives, different points of view, compelling us to empathise with self, with place, and of course, you know, with the other, giving us this kind of opportunity to reflect on the total human condition. And we can't undersell that. Empirical evidence, of course, supports these claims. Among adults, arts participation is related to behaviours that contribute to the health of a civil society, such as increased civil engagement, you know, greater social tolerance and acceptance, and the reduction in that kind of other regarding negative behaviour. So while we recognise that the arts has transformative effects, its place in K-12 education is often increasingly tenuous, and I think we're going to discuss that a little bit today, as systems have been given greater emphasis to the kind of ill-fitting standardisation of testing regimes. So the question I always think about the why construct is what is the value that the arts bring? And the arts education not only inspires and motivates young people to enjoy learning, it also supports the creative and critical thinking and the necessary emotional competency and intercultural understanding awareness to thrive in today's world. All that are highly sought after and valued in today's kind of global economy and society. So that's my first part to that question. But the second one, to answer your question directly, I'd encourage pre-service teachers to develop a toolkit of convergent and divergent thinking learning opportunities for the young people in their care. That learning opportunities that are not just closed to the value of explicit instruction for knowledge and skill acquisition, but then they leverage this kind of proficiency by creating learning opportunities that challenge binary thinking, and push students out of their comfort zone into the profound place of transfer and learner agency. You know, utilising pedagogical approaches like design thinking, like Hutagogy, that hero iteration, that hero discovery, creation, that makes mistakes part of the learning process and fundamentally places curiosity at the centre of all of their kind of self-discovery. So the question that I would have for pre-service teachers is, what are some uncommon experiences you could safely create that challenges all learners, while at the same time allows them to tap into their knowledge and skill toolkit to craft solutions as continuous learners and future builders?
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like so many pre-service teachers I talk to get so nervous about building a toolkit when they don't even know what tools they need to put in that kit, if you know what I mean. Like very often I was really blessed. I actually ended up doing preschool teaching for a while before I came into primary teaching. So I had a bit of experience, but a lot of my really close friends were always so daunted with that first or second prac because, you know, there's so many things and so many tools that are thrown at you, but they've got to find something that fits for them. Was there something that kind of fit for you that you've been using a lot over the years?
Well, I think it's one of those things where I was fortunate enough to be pretty confident in my own capacity. You know, I started in the industry, in an industry that had a real focus on design and advertising and marketing. So I really understood an audience and what their needs were very early on. And so I always operated as part of my toolkit thinking about what the end game is. What is the desired outcome in all of this? And I kept that always in my sharp focus. That doesn't mean I didn't get it wrong along the journey. Absolutely, I would have made mistakes along the journey because, you know, I'm learning something very new. And of course, when you're dealing with young people, I mean, they're fallible, they're under construction. And so not all your best plans always work out. But it's about, if we keep at the forefront, what is the desired outcome? And we have that as part of our kind of mindset. And then we work backwards to craft learning opportunities that cater for that kind of, you know, difference within that classroom.
Yeah, isn't that funny that you've said that? Backwards learning is a concept that I've, you know, known instinctually for, like, I guess a long time, like many people do. But, you know, like as a concept, I only picked up on it a couple of years ago. And the concept of backwards learning has really helped me with things, even create, like, a perfect example is I'm not great at mathematics. I'm not terrible, but I'm not brilliant. And using backwards kind of like learning and like planning my pedagogy like that was actually really helpful because I could use that creative process, like you're saying, to be able to work backwards. And I felt like it was like a creative scaffold for me. So yeah, there you go. Really cool.
You know, the other thing is also, Ro, that there's great courage in just having a go at things and trialing them, you know. And the other thing is this, you might have 2 Year 9 classes or 2 Grade 4 classes. And what you trial with one works really successfully, but with the other, it hasn't resonated. And that's where the second part of the toolkit that I would encourage people listening to this to develop is around a deep consciousness around the individual needs of those young people in front of you. And once you have a really deep understanding of what those needs are, in terms of their cognitive needs, in terms of their emotional and social needs, once you have you're in tune with that, you will always have a deeper consciousness about what's needed to help motivate them to be intrinsically better than they were yesterday. And you can't undersell the value of that kind of psychological safety that you want to create in that environment.
I've always loved the concept as well. I've always found as a person, not even just as a teacher, that when you get outside yourself, you know, like you live in your fears, like we all do. Hello, being human. But I've loved that when you step away from that, it's very like almost like a Buddhist philosophy, and you focus on, they call it the Singha, which means community. And I love that when you focus on a Singha and you think of the community and what's in your community, like in this case, students, you do actually get that fear off you a little bit, and you have that kind of creative focus, like you're saying, on trying to find something that works for everyone. Yeah. It's funny, we're talking about fears. I feel like going down to like the nub of it with the creative arts itself. That is, I know for a lot of my friends, a really sticky wicket, and it's one of their biggest fears is teaching dance and teaching how to play a musical instrument and standing up and having to deliver an acting performance. Being an actor myself, I've had many teachers ask me whether I would stand in for them. And I still get nervous myself as well, being a pre-service teacher. When you were a pre-service teacher and throughout your career, have you had similar fears in teaching something that's so open and daunting like the performing arts?
Yeah. Well, so I've never been a performing arts teacher. I've been a visual arts teacher.
And I count that as a performing arts.
Sure. I understand the question. I think it's a really interesting question. And so I'll respond in this particular way. You know, the way I see it is that we have 2 constructs to choose in life. to be our prevailing mindset? Love or fear? One is hope-filled and the other one is often hopeless. So for me, and I don't want to sound arrogant here, but for me, I have rarely allowed my mindset to operate from the position of fear. That doesn't mean, though, that I haven't felt fear. Of course I have. Actually, in fact, I'll share with you and your listeners a quick story of my very first year of teaching, and I had a year 9 printmaking class, right? So it was an elective at a co-ed school in Melbourne's West. Here I am, 23-year-old precocious teacher, thinking, he knows everything about everything, but I knew nothing about anything at that time, of course. I had great mentors at that school, an amazing visual arts department with some very strong women that taught me the understanding of equity in a really pronounced way. That's a story for another day. Anyway, so term 3 comes along and I know I've got to deliver this printmaking class. Now, what I'm excited about this printmaking class is that we're going to be doing silk screening. The students are going to develop their own motifs to print, but they actually have to make their own T-shirts. Mm-hmm. So I did a double degree at uni. One was a design course, the other was at the dip ed. And so I understood the art side of it in terms of the printmaking side of it, because that was a process that I'm really familiar with. But I have never sewn a garment in my life. I didn't even know what a sewing machine was. I mean, I knew what a sewing machine was, but I never sewed. So what I can share with your listeners was this. Normally, you make the T-shirt first, and then you do the silk screen. But of course, I'm delaying. I'm not wanting to face my fear because I knew I had no idea how to sew. And so what I did is I kept working on the printmaking, the design, showing them how to do the stenciling, did some trial runs, probably did a few extra than I needed to, for these students. And then it had to come time to the T-shirt. And the reason why I did that was because every week, without fail, every day, I sat on a sewing machine and I practiced sewing a T-shirt. And I just kept doing it. And can I tell you, I'm sorry, but I was shit house. I had no idea. I mean,
still after all that time.
Fancy the Italian who likes fashion that knows nothing about how to make fashion.
Oh, well, you can't be good at everything.
You can't be. So I'm quite happy to buy the fashion from someone else's creativity. Anyway, and so the day comes where I can't avoid this anymore. The students have cut their fabric. They've cut the ribbing for the top of the T-shirt. And I've now got to demonstrate this. I mean, because that's what good learning is, right? Good learning, good instructional design, good explicit instruction is also me modeling how to do things and then showing them samples of best practice. So I'm in front of the machine and I swear I must be sweating watermelons at this point, right? And I've sewn the sides, everything's together. Now I've got to put the ribbing around the collar. And that was the thing that freaked me out the most because I just couldn't get the circle right. Anyway, I'm on the sewing machine and I've pressed it, zoop, it's gone through. And I tell you what, it was the best stitch you've ever seen in your life. Like, can I tell you, it was better than what was in the instruction guide. And the students looked at me and they've gone, "Deprado, you can sew, man," right? And I've gone. That's right, fellas. And of course there were girls in the class too, but it was the boys making all the noise, thinking this is what it is. And they said, "Can you show us again?" I said, "No, guys, you've seen it once. That's all you're going to see.
You just got to hold it in.
You just got to hold it in."
There's the level of fake it till you make it there, and have that beautiful confidence.
Yeah, so I didn't want to shatter their dreams because I knew that the next time I did that, it was not going to be like that. So I wanted them to leave with the thought. So I'm sharing this story with you, as amusing as it is, because I just want us and the listeners to think about what was the lesson from this story that I gained, and that when you're unsure, or when one feels anxious or fearsome about something, perhaps there is some value in facing that fear and challenge ourselves through practice. I mean, isn't that what we do when we ask students who present with hesitancy? Don't we encourage them to attempt the task or the challenge? And if we enter into the mindset where that's the expectation we have of the young people in our care, then me as the educator, I can't stand still anymore. Hence why I said to you, I try to eliminate fear as a mindset in my daily operation. I still get anxiety around challenges that are presented to me that are brand new. But because I have a particular mindset that sees that challenge no longer as a challenge or an obstacle, but I see it as an opportunity for me to grow and to continue to develop. And then hopefully I can be, for the young people in my care, that example and not the exception.
Yeah, have you found that have you seen it in other teachers, that fear, and have you been able to kind of instill a little bit more of like a self-confidence within them? I know that's like a self journey, but there is a big point being a community again and being a teacher community and trying to support each other where you can. Have you feel like you've had to step in at times to be able to help teachers over the years that have felt very nervous about teaching the creative arts?
Yeah, I think this is an important question. And the reason why this is an important question is that we forget that learning communities, I don't really like referring to them as schools, learning communities are actually learning communities primarily designed to support young people. I get it. But for that to occur, we need to invest in the adults in their lives. And on an ongoing basis. And particularly when you have adults in that community who have aspirations of moving along in their careers in education, and they might become, heads of department or deputy principals or principals, how do we help them for each iteration of their own career development and their own growth? Yeah. And so my answer to your question is this: I've always been an educational leader that has invested heavily in the staff and really spent enormous amounts of budget into their professional growth and the development. Now, some enter that space begrudgingly. They see it as a compliance thing that they must do.
Yeah, as some would.
But again, it's a mindset thing, right? If you enter into it a mindset that it's compliance and ticking the box, then your growth in that space is generally going to be minimal. But if you enter it into the intent, and the intent is that if we take on, say, for instance, Michael Fulham's nuanced leadership book that he's come out with, which is about joint determination, fundamentally. If we adopt that kind of philosophy, well, we're all rowing in the same direction. We might have different starting points, and we might have different thresholds of what we can tolerate and how much we can tolerate in terms of our bandwidth, in terms of our growth. But when we're open to the possibility of learning new things and relearning old things, it only makes us a better teacher. So we've very much heavily invested over the journey in coaching programs that are really designed to help each person that we coach around their kind of now focused goals and their future focused goals. Those goals are often in kind of dimensions that are part of the local context of the school. So many of the schools I worked at had a faith dimension to it. So there would be a faith journey kind of dimension to their goals. Yeah. But there was always going to be goals around professional learning. There was always goals around pedagogy. There was always goals around personal well-being. And so I've always felt that it's the responsibility of the leaders within schools to create a sustainable, high-performance learning community that invests in all of its people.
I love that. I love that so much. I mean, Sandy knows a big portion at the end of my thesis was kind of trying to figure out whether schools were doing that. And I think that's it's been a really big hope for me, is the fact that, you're also schools that would be getting in community members and, industry professionals that have literally had years of practice at this one thing to be able to sit down and tell a teacher, I have had years of practice at this one thing. If you talk to any actor or any artist, most of the time they'll go, yeah, I spent like half a day drawing a tree and then I went back and I had to redraw it again. It takes time, it takes practice. And yeah, it's really inspiring to hear that. And do you feel that has, after they've had that professional, support and training, do you feel like that has definitely affected their teaching and has kind of affected students in a positive way when they're teaching?
Absolutely. I mean, the educators that are open to their own possibility and step into that space of permission to constantly iterate and grow have seen great gains in what they do. And what they're basically doing is they're developing a toolkit that becomes broader and broader, and that we then move from kind of the tightness of explicit instruction and the control of that, which has a place in education, to the place of great spontaneity, to the place of real kind of allowing the self-determination to occur. Because once you develop that broader sense of a toolkit, once you feel more confident in what you have as a capacity across the board, when a young person comes towards you with an idea, it's easier than to use the powerful and profound word of yes to them as opposed to no, because you have a toolkit knowing that you're already 2-3 steps ahead of that young person, right? And in terms of how you can support them. I'll give you another quick example before we move on. Look, I taught predominantly as the deputy principal in a school. I had a VC, visual communication and design class. And in that class, there are 3 design fields. There's environmental, there's communication, and there's industrial. Now, within those are professions that are very diverse. I'm not an architect, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a furniture designer, right? But here I am facilitating the learning to prepare someone for that next step. Now, what I realized very quickly is that I'm in an industry, not the teaching industry, I'm talking about now the professional design industry that has evolved in the 26 years that I've been in education. And technology has been a massive game changer in that space in my part of my
I can imagine, right? Yeah.
So how do I keep up with that? I'm not immersed in it every single day. So what I thought was, yes, I'll continue to learning. Yes, I'll continue developing my own skill sets so I have a really good entry-level understanding of some of these changes. But what I did was, if I had students in my class that were interested in becoming architects, or I had students in my class that were interested in becoming graphic designers or industrial designers, furniture designers, product designers, I actually would invite professionals into my class, either via remote means or actually doing workshops. And they would help facilitate some of the kind of more nuanced and advanced thinking that's happening in those particular spaces.
To be able to give them that opportunity to grow. Yeah.
So me, the expert, became the novice, right?
Yeah.
And I'm in that room and I'm learning with them, right? But every time I had a different expert in the room, I learned something new. So my toolkit became expanded. But the key here, Ro, is that I was not closed to my possibility.
Yeah.
And I wasn't close to their possibility. And I would go to great lengths to ensure that they had the best head start in that profession that they were pursuing, that I could deliver them. And I felt the best way to do that was to engage some of the best professionals in our industry in Australia. And can I tell you, the art and design world and the arts world are very, very prepared to do this.
Oh, they 100% are. There is a plethora of people that want to be able to share their knowledge. And that's so exciting that you've been able to provide opportunities to schools that in other cases wouldn't be able to have that. So I find that really inspiring. And along the idea of creative words of wisdom, I scurried through some of your online pages and I got onto your Tumblr blog, and there were a couple of things that, not even just as an artist and as an educator, but as a human, I really resonated with. There were 2, and they relate very much to what we've been talking about. So there we go. Everything's cyclical. So failures are only lessons, and you are your most important relationship. Those really speak to me. And Dr. Sandy has some questions to ask you along those lines.
All right. So basically, I'm really intrigued by this whole conversation that's going on. I wanted to ask, what are some creative strategies you have learnt yourself or taught, say, to primary students that may inspire pre-service teachers like Rowan to be creative and give things a go in her practical experience to counteract, and this is the big one, the fear of failure. So Rowan and I both identify with that notion of failure in our first episode. So what we're trying to do is develop resilience. So what would you suggest, Adriano?
Well, again, thank you for that question. I just want to push back a little on the construct of resilience first, though, before I get into my response. For mine, resilience can at times sit in the pocket of tolerance and surviving, not just the idea of bouncing back. So I much prefer the aspiration of resourcefulness over resilience. That's just my personal perspective.
That's great.
Where we move from the deficit language of surviving through resilience but we move to the aspiration of thriving through our resourcefulness, which, being resilient, is one of many components of resourcefulness, if that makes sense. So I just wanted to just clarify that. And people can have differing opinions about the word resilience, but I just feel that we need to.
No, I love
been in schools for far too long, and it's like, we've got to help that young man or that young woman become more resilient. It's like, you know what? They're part of the LGBT community. Do they really need to have to tolerate people's bad behaviour? Do they have to be resilient?
I like that. That's a really great example.
So from my perspective, it's like, well, how do I help that young person develop the resourcefulness so that they can thrive going forward? Anyway,
nice.
In terms of the strategies that you just asked about, Sandy, I think I mentioned a few earlier on in this conversation around design thinking and pedagogy, which are really powerful kind of creative learning process opportunities that allow for some structure, that allow for a young person to enter into a learning process where the process is the most profound part of their journey, not the end point. And pedagogy is really an approach, of course, that is totally out there because it's total self-determination of a young person. And if we're going to really hero curiosity and encourage young people to remain forever curious, then self-determination has to be part of any strategy that we adopt. But I will add that as a teacher, entering the classroom for the very first time, I get why controlling the lesson is important, right? Especially if it involves health and safety needs that have to become a priority. But what I'd encourage is, over time, that we become increasingly more and more comfortable in giving over control and leveraging student agency and voice. We have to always remember that young people are remarkable. Include them, right, actively in being authors of their own story. Perhaps my advice would be this: start as the author of that young person's story, then incrementally move to the position of co-author. Then ultimately, you become the supporter, the champion, the coach, the mentor on the sidelines as you watch them become the authors of their own story. I mean, isn't that what we're here for all learners? To develop the necessary kind of, self-efficacy, the emotional competency and the adaptability for them to thrive as accomplished and independent human beings. That's got to be the end game here, right? And if that's our end point, let's focus less on the content descriptors of an Australian curriculum, and let's focus more on the achievement standards of an Australian curriculum, because one is about outcomes, the other one is just about memorisation, and there's a difference.
We get so nervous about those things though, don't we? I mean, like, I can say as a pre-service teacher, when you look at for rubrics for so long and everything, when you get into a classroom, you're like, oh, if I don't tick this box, if I don't tick this, you move away from that concept of like self-efficacy beliefs in terms of like being able to like lessen the reins almost and just like let that spontaneity happen. And you do feel like many things in life, you want to hold on to them a little bit tighter, but it ends up having an opposite effect, doesn't it?
But Ro, there's a movement happening right now. There's a massive movement in this country happening and across the globe. There's a movement away from just content knowledge. I want to just put a little asterisk there. I believe there is value in knowledge. Of course there is, right?
Yeah.
And I said that at the very beginning. Start with, like in my learning area, I had to start with explicit instruction about knowledge around certain elements that were unique to my learning area: the design principles, design thinking, design process. That is
practicing how to sew a shirt.
Practicing how to sew a shirt. Right? There's an actual way to do that. Exactly. So there is real knowledge that's required and skills to be developed. But there is a movement afoot that we move away from that, because what's happened there is the binary thinking around that is it's a default to a standardized test. And can I tell you, standardized testing is just heroing the average, right? Imagine schools that only focus on the average of young people as opposed to the aggregate of their lived experiences. I bet you there'll be different results. Now, what we're starting to see in Australia, in the United States, in Europe, and parts throughout Asia in particular, and parts of South America, who are leading in many pockets, is that we're starting to see this move towards more competency kind of based areas where they're moving towards a greater personalisation of learning opportunities for the young person. If we move in that way, the new metrics that are happening in Melbourne through the University of Melbourne and the schools that they're piloting, if we move down that path, what we're starting to realise is that we're not creating assessment or rubrics for a task. The task it's task agnostic what's happening right now. What they're actually doing is they're creating rubrics and assessment tools that are around the achievement standards, about the end game, which then means technically you could have 30 tasks happening in that room for that student.
Yeah.
Now, I know there are teachers right now listening to that freaking out, going, oh my God, I've got to assess 30 different things. But, you know, at the end of the day, if you include the student as part of that process and allow them to iterate and allow them to demonstrate their proficiency of that achievement standard, why shouldn't we allow them to demonstrate it in a variety of ways that they feel most comfortable in?
Yeah, I love that. That's the kind of the thing I was saying at the very beginning about what does creativity mean to each person, you know, and I think that's why I love Sir Ken Robinson. He wasn't just talking about, you know, painting something or whatever. He meant creativity, whether it be, as you said, through design or whether it be through mathematics or something like that. You've got to give students a chance that way. It's exciting.
It's very exciting. I mean, you know, the other thing I'll say to you is this, you know, there are people far more intelligent than I am. I'm thinking about, I've sourced a quote in preparation for today's conversation from Andres Schleicher, who's the director of Program for International Student Assessment and Intergovernmental Economic at the OECD, right? And who is also widely regarded as one of the world's leading educational thinkers. In 2019, he addressed an inquiry at the House of Commons in England. And he believed that young people would benefit more from the skills gained through creativity, he said that explicitly, than test-based learning. And what he basically said to them was that British schools largely regard skills as inferior to knowledge and can be, because they can be very focused on traditional tasks such as memorization. Now, his quote, which I love this kind of part of the quote, I'll get it right. He said this: I would say in the fourth industrial revolution, arts may become more important than maths. Can you believe that?
Yep.
We talk about soft skills. This is his quote still. We talk about soft skills as social and emotional skills, and hard skills about being science and maths. But it might be the opposite. The science and the maths might become a lot softer in the future when the need for knowledge evaporates. And of course, he's also alluding to the fact there's a rise in artificial intelligence in this space too. Whereas the hard skills might turn out to be the qualities such as curiosity, leadership, persistence. He has used the word resilience. And this is his final part of his quote. So I think we need to be really, really cautious about how to design our curriculum around those sorts of things. So for me, the arts don't have exclusivity, right, to the types of skills that Schleicher has highlighted. Nonetheless, curiosity, leadership, persistence, resourcefulness are all important in the modern world today and are explicitly explored and taught through the arts.
Yeah.
So they're in a strong position, and I would encourage a brave school leader who's prepared to give the arts and any kind of learning area that is uniquely around curiosity and tapping into that and allowing a young person to step into that space the equal same amount of value and time in their fortnightly timetable or their weekly timetable than what has traditionally been. And I think they're going to see a dramatic transformation in their schools and the young people.
Yeah, I would love that. I know Sandy would as well. And I know that she has some pearls of wisdom that she wants to share as well.
Thank you. So I always think of the student I'm working with, and in this case today I'm thinking of Ro, and I have worked with her a fair bit on creativity. And I just want to sort of talk and unpack a bit of background information, because most people talk about creativity from a quantitative way, trying to assess it and look for like a quantitative data or some sort of checklist. Now, I want to tell you about what happened to Sternberg. He tried for 10 years to work out quantitatively how to assess creativity. And he actually admitted he couldn't do it. So he did numerous studies, and it's been a hotly contested area for a very, very long time. I would argue they've got the wrong frame of reference. They're following the lines of psychology where you are looking for a test. There lies our problem. You cannot test for creativity. So, and he's a fascinating person to, and I actually worked with a professor who knew him, and and he talked to me and he explained to me as well. Sternberg actually gave up trying to work out how to actually test for it. So then I've been thinking about Ro, because I've worked with Ro and I know that she really likes the idea of, well, how can we foster it? So I want to actually talk to you about someone else who is an Australian researcher, and I've been very fortunate to have worked with her, Nicole Leggett.
Oh, I love her.
So do I.
Sorry, I'm like a fangirl. I'm like, oh, I use her on like all my assignments.
I know. Well, no, okay. So I nearly went to Bologna with her last year for a couple of months. But anyway, something else came along called COVID, but that's okay, maybe another time. Now, the thing about Nicole is she comes from the early childhood paradigm. So the early years framework has a very different way of thinking. And in my mind, it's more qualitative oriented. And the article I want to mention to you, so I'm trying to say this Sternberg, okay, yep, Sternberg tried really hard, but he didn't quite nail it. She, I think, is offering a new way forward, which I think, Roa, you might like to look at. And the article that she talks about, and listen to it, it's called Cultivating Creativity, Intentional Play, Challenging Misconceptions. I'll say it to you again because you'll get it, Ro. Cultivating Creativity, Intentional Play, Challenging Misconceptions. Do you know why I've said that, why I've chosen that article for you?
I'm assuming, is it to do with my love for play-based learning?
Yes, that's right.
Everything I do is play-based learning. Because I really don't get why for primary school, like I did preschool for so many years and everything was play-based. And I'm like, this is amazing. I'm living in so many kids' imaginary worlds. I feel so inspired. I would literally come home with my cup so full. And then I go into primary schools and it's there, but it's not being harnessed the same. And it's that play-based. My favorite moments when I've been on my first two pracs were playtime. And when they were like, Miss Ro, do you want to come out to the park? I was like, yes, I do. Because I want to get to know them and I want to see that kind of growth. It's amazing.
So have you read a lot of Pasi Sahlberg's work on play-based learning? I've
heard some of his stuff, but I definitely haven't. You'll have to throw some my way.
Yeah, you definitely have to get into his work because it's at the heart of his entire kind of thinking.
So let me finish off with Nicole. That's right, because I want to actually share something with you about Nicole. She talks about this thing called the cycle of creativity. I love secular type things. I like that flowing on thing that's not linear, and so there's no starting point in many ways. But what she talks about is, I'll start with the term creativity. And what she's talking about is this idea, the ability to produce work that is intentional. And then she talks about, now this is what I love, dispositions. Mm-hmm. All right. So the notion of how you are and your attitude. Can you see it's a very different way of how Steinberg looked at it and so on. And then creative process. All right. So, and that process of things like divergent and convergent and imagination, and then productivity, but it's secular. So it doesn't actually have an end point. Mm-hmm. So it's opening up, I think, to a new way of thinking. And I know that she actually goes to Italy a lot for this, with this idea in mind, because she's actually at Bologna, at the University of Bologna, working it out all the time. So I would argue that we might want to move away from the psychology pillar when we're thinking of creativity, because it's too much into what is your evidence, what is your hard, quantitative data. I don't think I think he's been shown us this. We can't actually work it out that way because we've got the wrong lens. So that's just something to think about.
Well, I wouldn't disagree with the fact that learning is not linear. We know that, and anyone that thinks learning is linear is kidding themselves. I mean, it's what I know at 49 years of age, I didn't know when I was in my 20s, and every life experience, every encounter with place, with God, with people, with self has shaped the person that I am today, and being open to that particular possibility. What I will, though, say is this. The one aspect of kind of neuroscience or the psychology of learning that I am very open to is around constructing psychologically safe learning environments for young people. I'm in control of doing that, to allow them to step into their own agency, to allow them to feel a sense of deep belonging. So there's inclusion agency, then there's learner agency, then there's challenger agency and contributor agency. And that's the one part of the kind of psychological element of learning that I'm very still open to, and I would really encourage, because I think in the absence of a young person feeling that they're seen, known or valued, it doesn't matter what we do, right? They're not going to enter into their agency if they don't feel they belong or if they don't feel valued or seen. And the moment that we can get into that space, I think there's going to be a real revolution in their mind. But I love what you're sharing, Sandy, because I think the emphasis that I take away from what you're saying is that the way we currently measure everything in learning is antiquated. And it is time that we parked it. And we now need to start, because the problem is that what we measure at the moment is what we value at the moment. And what we value at the moment is time, bums on seats, hours in class. And we're measuring things that no longer have value, because we know that time is fluid now, that learning happens anywhere, anytime. And COVID has clearly demonstrated that, you know, for all our learners and us as adults. So I really support what you're saying there, Sandy, and I look forward to a time where we can think of different ways that young people can measure their growth, their success and their achievement.
Yeah, and that's in my PhD.
Right.
I also love that you both have really hearkened to me that concept of safety for students. That's so important. And on that question, Sandy knows what I've been leading in for. Her answer to this surprise question I'm about to throw at you, Adriano, had a lot to do with safety. And I thought it was really inspiring what you said in the previous podcast, Sandy, when it came to making sure that students felt safe, because that gives them that agency and that ability to be able to be spontaneous and grow that, you know, resourcefulness, as you would say, Adriano.
My five senses library.
Your five senses library. So I would like it's everywhere. Yeah. So I would like to know, Adriano, if you had $1 million, what would you do for the education system?
In particular, I think pre-service teachers.
And it has to be for the education system. Don't give me like, I'm moving back to Italy.
$1 million, I'll be lying on a beach in Monte Rosso al Mare.
And you were going to say that. That's why I said education system.
Drinking.
It has to be selfless.
The limoncello. Ask me that question again. Did you ask me about what I do for education or what I do for education pre-service teachers? What was the question?
Just for education, if you had $1 million, what would you do for the education system?
Yeah, well, you're not going to like this answer because, again, I'm going to push back and say that I actually think there's enough money in education. I just don't think we spend it well.
If you had $1 million of that budget, then where would you, let me change that then. If you had $1 million of that budget, because you think there's plenty of money there, if there is, with that $1 million, where would you place it?
Well, education's at one of our biggest exports in this country and one of our largest things in our economy. So I would imagine that $1 million is not going to get me too far. However, I would invest that money in trying to bridge the gap of the inequity that we have in our country of access to learning. And I would look at how we could invest that $1 million to get better return financially so that we can better support many of our people who are in remote or regional parts of Australia, our Indigenous community, our new migrants to this community, new refugees, so that they feel as significant and as valued as the privileged few, the privileged majority within our cities. And it won't be a lot of money, that $1 million to do that. However, you know, inequity is our biggest and greatest pandemic. And if we're serious about education and access to learning for all, then I would be looking at investing money in that equity piece to be truly transformational, because, you know, every young person matters, every individual matters, and we have to give them every opportunity to discover their possibility, but we have to do that in a way where if it was a 100-meter final, these people at the moment, they're not even on the track.
I know, yeah.
And that's the criminal part of it. So for me, I'd want to find ways in which to breach that, because, you know, that leads to that idea of creativity, because, you know, these people in these communities have so much to offer. And we need to... And
we may not even see it, and that's what makes me so sad. And I know that for a fact. I really relate to that really quickly before we wrap up, because I am from a very poor background, and I am from a poor rural background. And when I was young, my parents did everything they could to give me what they could with what they had. And my school, if it wasn't for one or two teachers that literally put their own time and actually, in one circumstance, their own money into getting me to go to acting classes and go to things like that, I promise you right now, guys, I would not be sitting here right now. I would not be as eloquent. I would not feel the way I am as a person, and I wouldn't be confident. So I think that is the most heartfelt and beautiful answer, Adriana, and I am going to try my best not to cry because it hits all the feels.
We all need a champion in our corner, don't we, Ro?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, we all need a champion, and you know, young people need people to believe in them.
Yeah.
And in this circumstance, I have to thank Sandy, because she really gave me hope in teaching when I started kind of giving up a little bit on it. So really thank you so much. And look, I'm going to wrap things up now, because we could go on talking till the end of days. But thank you so much, Sandy, and thank you so much, Adriano. And supporting pre-service teachers means so much to not just me, but so many people I know. So thank you, guys, and please keep up the good work. And I'm going to leave this with you, Sandy, to give us some words of encouragement.
Oh, thanks, Ro. Yeah, maybe a bit teary. Okay, I'll try and say it. So we do try and end off in a positive way. And I just want to finish off today because, Ro, yeah, look, you actually did hit at my heart when I first met you. And I taught you when we were on campus, and then literally overnight we were online. So this for me is you: create, nourish, inspire, elevate. That's you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you, everyone, so much for listening to our 5th episode of Series 1, Fear to Teach. I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to check out our socials. It's the New Brew PC on Instagram and Twitter. Also check out our website, www.thenewbrewpc.com. We offer free resources and a subscription, which is Prac Hub Plus. Be sure to check that out for bonus episodes and bonus resources. And remember, #DiveIn Mentality. Why did it take us so